My name's Aeris Stewart. I am a community manager for Humanitech, and I also work with the platform engineering community. I am super excited to be here. It's my first time at scale, and it's also my first time doing a non-panel presentation, so wish me luck. Today we're going to be, oh, thank you. Today I'm going to dive into some patterns that I've seen among some successful platform engineering setups. So the capacity that I'm able to observe these trends and these patterns is from the platform engineering community. We're a virtual first community. We have a Slack channel with over 10,000 members. We also have over 10,000 members in our meetup groups, which are in cities like New York, San Francisco, Tel Aviv, London, all over the place. We also have our flagship event every single year called PlatformCon. Last year we had over 6,000 attendees and speakers like Manuel Pais, Gregor Hoppe, Nikki Watt, etc. It was a really great time. And the community has really informed this talk. As a community manager and non-practitioner, I don't really get to see the day-to-day struggles that platform engineers face. So the folks who have shared their insights, whether it's through a webinar, through a PlatformCon talk, or through a one-on-one conversation, have really benefited me in my understanding of how platform engineering works and what doesn't work. So as we're going through this presentation, I'm going to call out some of the folks who've influenced certain aspects of the presentation and direct you to the resources that they've come up with. If you have any questions or want to dive deeper into any aspect of platform engineering, I highly recommend that you check out their work. They're really awesome. Now, before we dive into the bulk of the presentation, I just want to get an idea of where everyone's at in their platform engineering journey. I'm going to read out the options, and then if you can humor me by raising your hand when you see the one that you identify with most, that would be super helpful. So who is at an organization that is thinking about building a platform but hasn't decided yet? No one. Good to know. Who is just getting started on their platform engineering journey? Couple of hands. Awesome. A lot of this presentation is going to be geared towards you, so I hope it will be helpful. Who is at an organization that has already built their platform? Awesome. And who is just happy to be here? Awesome, great. I'm happy to have you here too. Thanks for coming. Now I'm just going to give you a brief roadmap of what we're going to review. There's a lot to platform engineering, and this is going to be a pretty high-level overview of a lot of different aspects of it. First, we're going to talk about getting started. So what is platform engineering? What are the main problems that we're trying to solve with a platform? Then we're going to move into platform as a product, which is going to be the bulk of our presentation. This is going to be the nuts and bolts of how you decide what to build, when to build it, and how to iterate and improve upon your platform. Then we're going to review how organizations have found the right level of abstraction for their platforms. So this is not going to be a recipe that you can take back to your organization and follow step by step. Instead, we're going to look at what has worked for a handful of organizations and individuals, and from that, get some ideas of what your organization can do to find the right level of abstraction for your platform and for your developers. Then we're going to briefly review what comes next after your platform is already built. I will highlight some resources that are available to you from the community, and then, of course, open the floor for questions. So, getting started. What is platform engineering and what is the core problem? In other words, what is cognitive load? I really love this definition that was proposed by my colleague at Humanitech, Luca Galante. He says that platform engineering is the discipline of designing and building tool chains and workflows that enable self-service capabilities for software engineering organizations in the cloud-native era. Platform engineers provide an integrated product, often referred to as an internal developer platform, which will be here referred to as an IDP, which covers the operational necessities of the entire lifecycle of an application. So in simpler terms, as a platform engineer, you're taking all of the tech and tools that your developers use in order to do their jobs and binding it into golden paths that help them navigate through their setup with lower cognitive load and a high amount of developer freedom. Recently, Gartner has put out a number of reports that have highlighted platform engineering as a top strategic trend for software engineering organizations. And one of the helpful frameworks that they have presented is these 3 pillars of platform engineering. And I wanted to introduce these because it really covers on a lot of the topics that we're going to be discussing today. The first pillar is that platform engineering improves the developer experience by building internal developer platforms to reduce cognitive load, developer toil, and repetitive manual work. Now, pillar is really important because it centers developer experience as the core of platform engineering. We're building platforms to improve the developer experience. The second pillar is that platform engineering makes software delivery easier for developers without abstracting away useful and differentiated capabilities of the underlying services. Now, we're going to talk about this pillar in terms of golden paths versus golden cages. You want to support your developers with the tech and tools without making it so that they can't go off-road when necessary. So striking that balance is going to be really key for a successful platform. The last pillar of platform engineering that they propose is that platform engineering teams treat platforms as a product to be consumed in a self-service manner. And as you saw from the roadmap, we're going to discuss what treating your platform as a product is like in length. Now, what is the core problem that we aim to solve while building a platform? Now, I've spoken to a number of different platform engineering organizations, and all of them will have a specific problem that they aim to solve. Some of them will notice that there are specific problems that are cropping up across the organization and different teams, and that each of those teams is coming up with their own solution. And they notice that, perhaps it would be more efficient if we have one solution that works for everyone. Other organizations are going to want to adopt a platform because they see that other organizations are doing it and it's working really well for them. The underlying concept and the thing that ties all of these different reasons together is this idea of cognitive load. Cognitive load refers to the amount of information that a person has to process in order to complete a task. When this load exceeds our working memory capacity, we struggle to complete our task. Now, as I'm sure all of you know as practitioners, in the last few years, the shift left has increased cognitive load on developers. You have an increased amount of responsibility over the software delivery process, and at the same time, you have so many tools a part of the cloud-native landscape that you're going to have to use in order to get your job done. And all of this is just too much cognitive load in order for developers to move quickly and efficiently. Too much cognitive load also leads to a poor developer experience, which again leads to poor developer productivity. Now, platform engineering aims to maintain the level of developer self-service and freedom that we associate with you build it, you run it DevOps, while at the same time alleviating this crippling cognitive load that you're getting on developers with the way that DevOps has been implemented at a lot of organizations. And this is accomplished through the building of golden paths. If you want to learn more about cognitive load in the software engineering organizations, I highly recommend checking out resources from Paula Kennedy. She's the COO at Syntasso. She did a wonderful talk of this at PlatformCon 2022 and has also published some blogs on the Platform Engineering blog and on InfoQ. Highly recommend checking that out if you want more information. I also wanted to show you this chart that was shared by Daniel Bryant at PlatformCon. He's head of DevRel at Ambassador Labs. But he talked about basically the increase of cognitive load from the perspective of an individual developer over the course of a multi-decade long career. And you can see that in 2000, you're working with ID, CVS, a developer portal, you're only having to code, and by 2020, it's just exploded into so much more. And platform engineering is aiming to alleviate a lot of the cognitive load that comes from this increase in responsibility. Now let's get into the meat of this presentation, which is platform as a product. This is really what enables you to build a platform that people actually want to use and that actually enables your organization to move faster. Platform as a product has a lot of different elements to it. You're going to want to conduct user research. You're going to want to define your mission. You're going to want to leverage your lighthouse teams. You're going to need to get continuous feedback from your users. You're going to want to iterate upon your platform. And then you're going to want to market your platform internally. You'll see a lot of these aren't necessarily technical subjects, but they're more cultural ones, but they're just as important. Now, why do you want to treat your platform as a product? Manual Peace has introduced this framework because like any other product, platforms are optional to use. They're carefully designed to make using them easier, and they're supposed to evolve as the technology changes. As such, it's crucial to apply the same principles and processes to platforms as you would to products. Now, when I talk about this, I have a pretty silly analogy, and that's that of having a knife. So imagine that you're like opening a box from Amazon, and someone offers you like a 27 function like super knife that you can use to open this box. And they're like, hey, I have this and it's $50. Now, most of us, we have scissors, we have a butter knife in the kitchen. Like it works just as fine to open the box. Are we gonna like pay $50 for this super cool knife? You know, it has a ton of functionality, but maybe not, because it's not serving our needs better than the thing that we already have, and it's more expensive. We have to think about platforms in a very similar way. Even if you have all of the cool tools in the world, all of the cool functionality, people aren't necessarily going to want to use it if it isn't easier than what they're already doing, or unless you've convinced them that it's actually solving one of their pain points. Another question that comes up when we talk about platform as a product is, well, why can't you just mandate that everyone uses the platform? And the answer is that you can't, because you can't mandate that anyone uses anything. If people think that their original solution is easier, they're going to find a way to do that. And that's going to cause a lot of security vulnerabilities and will increase resentment, create shadow infrastructure, and reduce trust in your organization. On the other hand, if you take a product management approach to your platform, you can ensure that people are adopting your platform because they want to use it and improve it. It's just a much better path. Now, I have a question for all of you. How should you decide which features to build for your platform? I'm going to go through the options again, and please humor me by raising your hand. It's not graded, so no pressure. Okay. Option A, do you copy Netflix or Google's platform? Thank you. Option B, do you do what you think, as an engineer, will most improve the developer experience? Do you C, conduct user research? Y'all are smart. Do you D, pick random features out of a hat? I like y'all. Okay. The answer is C. And when you look at it in a format like this, it seems pretty obvious. Unfortunately, a lot of the organizations that we talk to have chosen either approach A or B. They're like, hey, this platform works for Netflix and Google. Let's copy and paste it to our platform and see what happens. Or you have individual engineers who have solutions that are valid and worthwhile, but they don't go through the effort of understanding what their developers want and need, and as a result struggle to build features that developers actually want to use. And for that reason, I say that if you go routes A or B, you might as well pick D. You have to do your user research. I think Gregor Hoppe put this pretty well in his keynote for PlatformCon. He said that you can either be smarter than everyone else and anticipate all of their needs, or you can evolve the platform based on user needs. And in order to figure out what your users, what your developers actually need, you have to conduct user research. So unless you gain a deep understanding of your developers' pain points and what you're already doing to mitigate them, you're not going to build a platform that people actually want to use. Now, I have an example here. I realize that I didn't test how it's going to work with this mirror, so give me 1 second as I try to open it. Awesome. So this is a template that was shared by a practitioner in our community. Michael Galloway used to work at Doma and Netflix and is now at HashiCorp as the Director of Platform Engineering Infrastructure. And this is just a sample of what user research can look like at your organization. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different depending on who you're surveying and what you're trying to build, but this is a pretty good idea of the types of questions that you want to ask. The idea is that you're going to walk through what people are actually trying to accomplish at your organization and ask questions that reveal what's working, what's not working, and what types of features will help them solve the problems that they're encountering. So I'll just scroll through here. I'm not going to read through all of the questions, but if there's an opportunity for me to share slides later, you can find it there, or you can ping me on LinkedIn, and I would be happy to share this template with you. It's a really helpful starting point if you're unsure what to do. Oh. Awesome. It's all good. I didn't need them. Okay. Awesome. So your research is going to be really important in terms of informing what features you want to build, but it's also going to help with a much more fundamental mission, which is your mission statement. So answers to questions like, what does your process look like from picking up a JIRA ticket to pushing your code into production? Or for leadership, what are the critical projects or initiatives that have to be successful? All of this is going to define what your mission statement will look like. Now, I remember when I was first learning about all of this and I saw define your mission on the top of the list of things you needed to do in order to do platform engineering well, I was a little bit confused because it seems like maybe a vanity thing, but it's actually really important because your platform can look like so many different things. There's so many different things that you can build. And a lot of organizations will find that they get lost in the sauce when they start their platform engineering journey. Your mission statement is going to be really important because it gives your platform team a clear identity and it helps them determine their priorities and stick to those priorities. It will also help you understand as a platform team how to communicate your impact to the business to all of the relevant stakeholders in your organization. So what makes a good mission statement? I really like this framework that was proposed by Michael Galloway. He says that your mission statement should be emotional and inspiring. Your team should jump out of bed and say, I want to work on that. A bit of an exaggeration, but you get where we're going. It should also be simple and meaningful. You want to use plain, easy to understand language. Your mission statement should not be overwhelmed with jargon. And the last part, which I think is also probably the most important part, is that your mission should live as long as your organization does. The strategy and tactics that you use to achieve that might change, but your purpose should be stable. Now, just another check-in. Which of these two mission statements do you think is stronger based on the framework that I proposed? Is it A or B? Everyone raise their hands for A. And who wants to vote for B? Everyone's on the fence. Awesome. Okay, so when I originally made this presentation, I was leaning towards B. Now, I understand when it comes to a mission statement, it can be a little bit subjective, but I'll give you some reasoning behind that. The first is that it's short and easy to remember. The second is that it's talking about building something that people love, which I think is a really emotional thing that your platform team can connect to. The other thing is that it's actually talking about a destination. I think the first statement is strong in that it tells you like how you're going to get there or the specific metrics that you want to achieve, but it can come off as a bit of a laundry list of things that is subject to change over time. However, B is much more amenable to changes in what your platform needs to accomplish as it evolves alongside the technology and your developers' needs. Now, the second part of platform as a product is going to be leveraging lighthouse teams. So a lot of teams will come and ask, well, how do we go about building our platform? What do we build first? This is one approach that we found is most successful, and that is to find a lighthouse team within your organization. You're going to want to spend a lot of time with this team to figure out what features they need, what sort of lines of communication you need, and you're going to spend a lot of time refining your approach so that you get it right. You're also going to want to identify evangelists within your team to push adoption, both within the Lighthouse team and ultimately within the entire organization. And once you've mastered this, you're going to be able to repeat this with more teams across the organization until the platform is covering everyone that you want it to. The strength of this approach is that it helps you avoid biting off more than you can chew, or building a platform that's so big that it's overwhelming and unable to be finished, while at the same time making sure that your platform provides real value from day one that you start building it. Now, once you've built all of your features, you might be thinking, I'm good. But that's not necessarily the case. You're going to want to continue to get regular user feedback so that you know if your platform is actually making the difference that you want it to. The initial user research that you conducted is a good framework to understand what type of feedback you'll want, but it's not enough. You have to keep on coming back. Your platform team needs to solicit regular feedback from your users and then use that feedback to iterate upon the platform and improve it so that it continues to meet your developers' needs. The open lines of communication will translate to consistent improvements to your platform over time. Olga Sturman did a great talk about this at PlatformCon. I highly recommend checking it out if you're unsure on how to establish these open lines of communication with your developers. Then the next part is just iterate. Try again. You'll find that there are tons of areas where your platform can improve. For the sake of time, I'm going to have the example be in the section about finding the right level of abstraction, but there we'll see how one organization, Nesto, used the user feedback that they received to change their platform for the better. Now, you've built your platform, you're doing well, what comes next? You need to market your platform internally to get buy-in. A lot of organizations think that if they build a really awesome thing with all of the functions and all of the solutions, that people are just going to come and use it. And unfortunately, that is not often the case. It's just not a viable strategy to ensure that your platform actually gets adopted. So you need to be a marketer for your platform. It's also important to keep in mind that while developers are important stakeholders in your platform engineering process, they aren't your only stakeholders. You're going to need to get buy-in across the organization in order to succeed. So another question, which groups are stakeholders in your platform? Is it developers, DevOps sysadmin, managers, C-suite, or all of the above? Y'all are smart. It is, in fact, all of the above. The important part to keep in mind is that while all of these people are stakeholders in your platform, they don't all think the same and they don't all have the same priorities. So Gallo Navarro had an amazing platform talk called Salesman Tricks for the Platform Engineer, and he pulls out 3 different types of stakeholder groups and 3 differences that they might have in terms of what they're focusing on and how you can market your platform to them in an effective way. So CEOs, C-levels, executives, they're going to be focused on long-term strategic issues. They get people coming to them telling them that whatever their issue is going to be the end of the world all the time. So telling them that the platform is really important, is going to make a really big difference, isn't going to be enough. You have to understand how your platform fits into their long-term business objectives in a measurable way and communicate how your platform is going to have an impact on those goals. Now, your managers are a different stakeholder group. They're juggling a lot because they're sitting in between a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations and priorities. You're going to want to figure out which of these demands, which of these stressors is causing the most pressure. And then you're going to want to figure out how your platform is going to alleviate that pain point. For your sysadmin and DevOps, they might feel a bit threatened by the platform. They might think that it's coming to replace their jobs. So you're going to want to communicate that that's not actually the case. The platform is actually an opportunity for them to take their skill set of solving individual problems across the organization and applying that across the organization in a more standardized way. Marketing is also about communication. It's not just about saying what your platform is going to be good for. It's also about setting expectations. Gregor Hoppe has one example of this about a floating versus a sinking platform. So you're going to think about your IDP as a platform on top of your base level of tooling. And as that base level increases its functionality, you have to decide what happens to the platform you're building on top. Either the functionality stays the same and becomes a sinking platform, or as the base platform's functionality increases, it will discard the redundant functionality and become a floating platform. And he clarifies that there isn't necessarily a right answer or a right choice between the two. The important part is that you communicate to your stakeholders which of these platforms you're planning on adopting so that people aren't surprised when you're discarding functionality that you spent a lot of time building in order to keep your platform afloat. Now we're going to move on to the next section, which is about finding the right level of abstraction. I'm going to give you a few examples, a few quotes from the platform engineering community on how different organizations have navigated this topic. I will also direct you to the full talk so that you can get a more technical deep dive. Now, this is going to be one of the biggest challenges in building your platform because you want to provide a supported golden path for your developers, but you also don't want them to be trapped in whatever you've built. Golden paths are always going to be better than golden cages. The other hard part about finding the right level of abstraction is that it's never a finished process. You're going to have to keep being curious about what's working and keep iterating according to the user feedback that you're getting throughout the process. Now, this is a quote that I like about finding the right level of abstraction. A few months ago, I did a handful of open-ended case study surveys with folks in the community. And this person weighed in on this topic. He said that finding the right level of abstraction is never a done thing because you're always learning from your customers what works and what doesn't. And he said that at his company, they had tried to go after the highest level of abstraction that they could without fully abstracting the underlying concepts. But in the process, they learned that it only worked when what happens below the abstraction is highly reliable. Otherwise, people will feel the need to become more involved and circumvent the platform. A different person weighed in that at their company, they had a reference point to start with because they understood that the folks at their company were used to the past experience from something like Heroku, so that was a reasonable target. So they didn't start at a high level first. They prioritized stability and reliability, and they leaned on docs and reliance to improve cognitive load for their customers. Once they had a better understanding of the configuration needs across all their teams, then they began to build more opinionated layers on top. Now, these are a couple of broad examples of approaches that organizations have taken to find the right level of abstraction. The next two examples are going to be a little bit more detailed. So one case study is Netflix. Again, I will direct you to the platform contact from Brian Leatham because he explains this in much more detail. But Netflix took a more UI-based approach to finding the right level of abstraction. They wanted to reduce cognitive load by putting UIs on top of their platform setup. So their platform engineering team adopted Backstage, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, an open source developer portal and service catalog, and in the end, we're able to reduce context switching, unify the developer experience on top of its GraphQL-based platform API. This is just one approach. Another approach is that of Nesto. So when Nesto grew as a company, they had a lot more complexity that resulted. A lot more developers, a lot more customers, a lot more technology, and all of it just became way too difficult to adequately manage. So the platform team came in and created different levels of abstraction based off of a new generic Helm chart to meet the needs of this increased complexity. This solution was supposed to allow a better separation of concerns between dev and ops. But the platform team also noticed that it was creating a golden cage. So they created levels of abstractions as opposed to just one. And this had a spectrum from complete recipes to generic modules. So the complete recipes provided a path of least resistance where only the useful parameters were exposed and best practices were built in by default. So this was probably the most supported and restrictive layer. Then underneath that, you had generic modules, which offered a bit more structure, provided reusable building blocks that developers could combine as needed. Then, in extenuating circumstances, you had custom extensions, where developers could use raw resources or a custom chart when needed. And the important part about these custom extensions was that the learnings from these experiences were refactored into the golden paths as much as possible, as to avoid developers needing to go off the golden path as frequently. I think this is a really interesting case study because it illustrates how finding the right level of abstraction doesn't necessarily mean you need to find one correct level of abstraction. I think this process of breaking it into different levels that developers can choose when needed was an effective one, and it's useful for other organizations to consider when building their internal developer platform. Now, what comes next after you've built your platform? The most important thing is to embrace the role as glue. As a platform team, you understand all of the problems that your organization is facing when it comes to the setup, and you understand why you've built the solutions that you have. So it's really important to continue to glue all of those tech tools and solutions together and continue to improve the developer experience for your engineers. The other thing that's really important is to continue to educate and empower your organization about your platform's capabilities. This can take the form of a lot of different stuff. You can do regular architectural design reviews, you can do internal hackathons, whatever it is, you need to make sure that everyone knows what your platform is doing and how it's providing value. Your successful platform team needs to be a central source of education and best practices for the rest of the organization so that the platform continues to provide value over time, even after the bulk of the functionality is built out. Now, if you have any more questions about any of the stuff discussed here, there are a number of resources that you can consult. Internal Developer Platform is exactly what it sounds like. It has a lot of introductory resources to what IDPs are and also highlights some tools that you can use in building your IDP. Platformengineering.org is where you'll find the hub for all of the meetup groups, all of the upcoming webinars, all of the blogs, and PlatformCon stuff. And PlatformCon is coming up next summer. I'm really excited about it. We just figured out who's going to be speaking. We're expecting over 15,000 attendees this year, so I highly recommend you check it out. It's a really great opportunity to connect with platform engineers all across the globe and have Q&A directly with the speakers. It's really great. Also, if there are any resources from this talk that you want from me specifically, feel free to reach out via email or just ping me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to assist however possible. And with that, are there any questions? Thank you. Oh.
Of course.
Did you ever, or did folks ever talk about when they went on their listening tour, their interview tour, talking to developers to find out what the pain points were? Was there also issues where developers didn't know what they didn't know? Um, if the platform team's trying to make suggestions, um, but find a middle ground between what the developers think they want and what is possible that they don't know that they, yeah, don't know. Not a very good question, sorry, but
Uh, the short answer is yes. It happens all the time. As you can imagine, with organizations, the larger that they get and the more stakeholder groups that you have, the more confused the list of priorities becomes. One of the things that I probably should have mentioned in the platform as a product section is that it's really important, if it's possible for your platform engineering organization to do so, to have a dedicated product manager, because they're going to be able to translate all of the feedback that you're getting about what people think they want and figure out how to translate that into something that's actually going to be a viable solution for the platform. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Any other questions?
So this crowd seemed to be very heavily. We focused in on the idea of do user interviews, see what they actually want, see what their pain points are. But my experience has been most of the C-suite people are in the B category: copy Google, copy Netflix. So, like, what metrics can we use to talk them out of that approach?
That's a really interesting question. Unfortunately, I have everyone's least favorite answer, which is it depends on what the goals of the organization are. There are a handful of past webinars from the platform engineering community that illustrate the journey of companies who did attempt to copy Netflix and Google and went astray because of that. I guess my light recommendation would to figure out where it went wrong and maybe raise those as points of concern. Um, the other thing in terms of like metrics or KPIs that you can focus on as a platform team in order to prove that your approach is better, I think it's a really complicated question. I had a conversation with Michael Galloway a few months ago about this, and it's something that is evolving, figuring out like what impact your platform is having on like your DORA metrics, for example. Certainly, those are a great starting point to figure out if what you're building for your platform is actually making a measurable impact on the business goals and actually accelerating the software delivery process. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. Happy to discuss more and maybe loop you in with him just to get a better idea from a practitioner of some of the issues that you can run into when relying on those metrics.
Could you please describe what the golden pathway is in a little bit more detail, and just in general the golden cages also?
Thank you for asking that. A golden path is an opinionated set of tech and tools that allow your developers to navigate through their workflows in like the easiest possible way. It's essentially a path of least resistance for developers through the setup. A golden cage would be the same thing, but so rigid that developers can't do anything else, even if their task requires that they do something else. So it's a bit of a loose definition, but the idea is that a golden path provides that support and provides that opinionated path, whereas a golden cage does that, but a little bit too much. Does that make sense? Awesome. There you go. Sweet. Well, thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of the conference.